Good morning and happy Saturday. Today is the day to learn about working with the ancestors. So if you are here live, then make sure that you let me know that you are here, say hello, and ask any questions. So I want to encourage you to ask questions, put them in the comments. And then if you're watching this in as a replay, then go ahead and comment a replay and ask questions also as you're watching this lesson, because then I can come back and answer them as you watch these lessons. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So what we're doing today is we are talking about working with the ancestors. And so there are several questions that I am kind of using as a guiding for this particular lesson. And so we're going to be looking at why would you start a relationship with your ancestors? Why would you want to do that? What if you didn't have a good relationship with your family when they were living? So we're going to talk about the type of ancestors that you do want to make sure you have a relationship with, like which ones are the best ones to work with. And then, of course, I'll mention what the biggest mistake is that people tend to make when they start, and why that avoiding that mistake is so critical. And then we're going to talk about how to begin, what the steps are that you can take. And we want to keep it simple. So that's what we are talking about today. So let me just go back here to my page so that I can see if anyone comments. Um, it's kind of tricky to have all of these pages up so that I can see them all in one place as I'm delivering the lesson. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So I want you to just kind of activate your learning mind, right? And set up the space for you to actually learn and to be present so that you can absorb the information that is going to be useful to you. So, if possible, turn off any distractions, kind of be in the moment. And of course, you know that this video will live here so that you can come back to it. So, I want to go ahead and start our discussion today talking about, like, why would you want to form a relationship with your ancestors? What is the benefit? And so you can think of your ancestors as any other type of spirit that you create relationships with. So if you already have a spiritual practice where you connect with certain spirits, then you can think of your ancestors in the same way. So this is a spiritual practice. This is a spirit-based practice that we're going to be talking about. Like, so connecting with the ancestors, they are spirits, and so therefore this is a spiritual practice. Now, why would we want to connect with ancestors? So let's say if you connect with your angels, or if you connect with what you understand as your spirit guides, or if you connect with an ascended master. So depending on what your practice is already, or maybe you don't connect with anyone, you're just when you meditate, you're just going inward and seeking that silence. Or you may have grown up with in a particular religion. So, for example, I was raised Catholic. So when we pray, of course, we pray to Jesus. And so you can think, well, what is my understanding already of spiritual practice? What do I mean when I say that I'm connecting to spirits? And then you can think of your ancestors in similar ways. And the only difference, of course, is that some ancestors you would be connected with genetically, right? So you have that genetic signature that's connecting you to them. And of course, that's only one type of ancestors. There are many different types of ancestors. So the genetic ancestors are the ones that are coming from our lineage, from our human lineage. Then that is one set of ancestors that you can turn to. And so those are the ones that I'm going to be talking about today. So now, why would we want to connect with those ancestors? So, first, let me distinguish between the way that I understand ancestors and the way that I've been taught is that there are ancestors that are well ancestors, and then there are ancestors that are not well. And so the well ancestors are the ones who have reconciled their lives and kind of moved on and transitioned to become elevated. So if you may have heard of elevated ancestors or doing a ritual to elevate your ancestors, that's really what it's talking about. It's talking about doing, making sure that those ancestors have passed on and then have reconciled their lives so that they are in a luminous state, right? They're in a benefit, in a state where they're going to want to assist. And then conversely, there's the unwell ancestors. So the unwell ancestors, some people refer to them as ghosts, or although ghosts are really ones that are stuck, that haven't transitioned and haven't reconciled. So there could be, so ghosts and unwell ancestors kind of have the same feel to them, where you feel like they're intruding and it feels like they have this negative effect. But a lot of times we don't, it's not like a ghost like we see in a movie where it's attacking you and opening the cupboards and throwing things around. And so they're not like that. And in fact, a lot of our ancestors who haven't reconciled and have not fully transitioned, it means that they have an energy that is still affecting us. So ancestral energy affects us. So both the positive ancestral energy affects us and the negative ancestral energy affects us. So if there was something that they did or something that happened in their lives, and then when they died, they did not fully transition to reconcile their lives. So that energy then stays and connects with the present members of the lineage, and then that affects them. So sometimes, of course, they think that, or that energy isn't necessarily being intentionally negative. So the ancestral energy, for example, it could be of someone who was following their dream and set off on a voyage and then died when they were on that voyage. And so you can, so the energy there is like, well, following your dreams is dangerous. So you don't want to be careful. You don't want to be risky, right? And so that energy in itself would be the maybe the intention of it is that it's helpful, but in fact it's not helpful. And the fact that they're that the fact for them that they set off on this journey and then for whatever reason they died during the journey, then so they did not get to fulfill their purpose. So then that means that that ancestor is not reconciled, right? So they have to be able to transition and move on and then reconcile fully so that then they can come back as well ancestors. And so we want to work with the well ancestors. We don't want to work with any ancestor that shows up, because the way they show up and the energy may not be positive for us. And again, it's not necessarily intentional of them. Like they don't necessarily want to stop us from living our purpose, or they don't necessarily want to um, to cause negative effects. But what happens when they kind of function with the energy that's not reconciled, then that causes these negative effects. And so now, what do we mean when there's negative effects? What are we talking about? Well, things can be difficult for you, right? So if we have, so for example, if there's this ancestor that died on their journey to seeking their purpose, and they say, no, 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 like don't do that because it's dangerous. You want to not take risks and you want to like stay comfortable. And so then that means that any time that you want to seek fulfilling your purpose, then it's going to be difficult for you because they want to protect you. But in fact, that energy is not being positive, right? Instead, what they're doing is they're holding you back, and they may be you may be kind of connecting to that energetic fear or that energetic signature of fear that they have. And so, and of course their intent is to keep you safe, but it's stopping you, it's blocking you, it's prohibiting you from really reaching your goals or from attaining that sense of fulfillment that you have. And so yes, and so like Janet is saying, they have their own frequency, which may not be in our best interest. And so that is very true. So when you develop an ancestral practice and you want to be intentional about connecting with the well ancestors, because one of the things that the well ancestors can do is that they can protect you, right? And so they can protect you from the unwell ancestors. So they can provide kind of like that, those boundaries between you and the unwell ancestors so that you are protected from that particular energy. And so that's one reason why you would want to connect with your well ancestors, is because they can protect you, right? They can provide that energetic protection from these energies that may be influencing you that are not positive, and that are and not that they're intentionally not positive, but they're in your life, the way that you interact with them, the result, the effect is not a positive one. And again, what does that feel like? That usually feels like things are hard, like things are difficult, like you're trying to achieve some things and then it's just not happening. And so then a lot of times, even if you've tried, so you've gone for this healing and you've gone for this healing over here and you've tried to make internal changes, well, it doesn't matter how many internal changes you make. If those ancestral energies are affecting you, then it's going to be very difficult, because what you need is you need protection from those energies, so that then whatever you do in your own energetic field has the effect that you want it to have. So stopping and protecting from those energies is very important. So developing that ancestral practice, even if you're just connecting with your well ancestors and asking for protection, that is a great way to begin. And so one of the biggest mistakes that people tend to make when they connect with their ancestors is that they just connect with any ancestors that want to connect with them. And so there's the danger there, right? Because then some of those ancestors may not be well ancestors. So when you ask to connect with your ancestors, you want to ask to connect with your well ancestors, and that's going to be very important. And then of course, asking your well ancestors to protect you from the unwell ancestors. And when you're creating your boundaries, whatever spiritual practice or energetic practice you have to create your boundaries, then you can ask them to help you shore up those boundaries to protect specifically from the energies of the unwell ancestors. So that's one thing that you want to remember. And so if, let's say, you've had a tough relationship with recent ancestors, so family members who have passed on in your lifetime, like that you remember, that you can track, that you know who they are, that you know some of their personal history. So whatever that relationship is. So if it's a negative one, so let's say it could be someone who did things that you are completely against, that goes against your own values. Or it could be someone who completely rejected you and who treated you badly, who caused you trauma. So whatever the relationship is, whether it was a negative relationship because of who they were or because of how they treated you or both, sometimes we're like, well, no, I don't want to create an ancestral practice because we think of those people, right, that we don't want to connect with. And so now it would be problematic if those ancestors are unwell ancestors, because then, of course, they're going to be affecting us negatively. That means that their energy hasn't fully transitioned and hasn't reconciled, right? So they haven't worked through those issues that you saw presented in their lifetime. And so, one of the things that you want to do is you want to not think of the fact that if you connect with your ancestors that you have to connect with them, because you don't. Like, you have a choice as to who you connect with, and so you don't have to connect with people or ancestors that you don't want to connect with. So if there was a negative kind of interactions between you, or if they caused you pain, like, you don't have to connect with them. And even if you say, well, I don't know who the good ones are, that's okay. Like, you don't have to know. You just have to have that intention, because there has to be people in your lineage, even if you have to go back generations, that are well ancestors, and that they are there to assist you. So they are there to provide these blessings and this protection. And so when we connect with them, when we connect with those well ancestors, one, they can provide protection. So that's one of the benefits that having this relationship does, is that it improves, or it strengthens our own boundaries and our ability to protect ourselves from these negative energies. So that's one. However, like, another positive in connecting with these well ancestors is that you can connect with their blessing, right? You can connect with their strengths, with their gifts, whatever it was that they learned during that particular lifetime. So if you have someone who, if you connected with an ancestor who, let's say, was able to be a great influence on their community and was able to build these relationships and thrived in community, then you can learn from that ancestor. You can learn those particular skills from that ancestor. If you had an ancestor who was a great gardener and who loved working with plants and really was able to commune with nature, then you can connect with that ancestor and bring that blessing forward. So a lot of times when we block our connection with what we perceive as everyone who's negative, well, but there's also a lot of positives, right? And we don't want to block those positive ancestral energies, right? What I refer to ancestral blessings. And so when you build these relationships with your ancestors, then you can start getting to know who they are, like what energetic signature do they have. Just like the negative ones have this negative energetic signature, the positive ones bring in this positive energy, and so that then we can connect to it and utilize it in our lives, so that then we can become better. We can use those skills that they can share with us, and we can connect with it. So I think one of the biggest and best effects when you first connect with them is that protection. But once you have and are building the relationship, like, what do you do what can you do? What are the possibilities beyond just asking for protection? And of course, protection is a big one. Um, and ancestors don't just protect you, they can also protect others. So they can protect your children, they can protect your siblings, right? So you can ask for protection for people who are also connected to them. So even if they haven't necessarily built that their own connection, because they're part of that lineage, they're part of that DNA lineage, that blood relation. So they're connected to them, especially if you think of your children or maybe your grandchildren, and you want to ask the ancestors to not just protect you, but protect them as well. So um, that's one thing that you want to do. And as you continue your relationship or building your relationship with them, then you can move to trying to understand what are the blessings, what are the blessings that they are bringing forward, and how can you start connecting with what those particular energies are. Like, what are the blessings of these ancestors? So when you first begin, it may be a little difficult to get a sense of them as individuals. So you may get a sense of just like the energy of the ancestors. The more that you work with them, the more you will start getting a sense of their individual energy, because of these ancestors were people, like they were humans, however many years ago. So depending on how many generations back they're from, and they come with that particular life experience. So they have certain personalities, they have certain features, they have certain energies that they come with. And so you can also ask specifically to work with a well ancestor who has a particular energy that you need in the moment. So, and then calling them forward, and then building a relationship with them. So now, some people I know also like are adopted, or don't know their family of origin. And so you don't have to know who your family of origin is. You can still connect with your ancestor. So you don't necessarily need to know to be able to connect with him, because you are already connected with them, right? So if you think of, and if you say, well, how, what do you mean, like, what is it, what do you mean, like, we're connected to them? If you think of the so quantum science has proven that there, when two cells split, they remain in communication with each other, right? And at some point, our cells were connected to them, right? So we are a product of their DNA. We're a product of their bodies, and so we still have this energetic connection even if we don't know them. So that means that we have this energetic relationship with them that we may not even recognize. And so the idea here, when we start forming a connection with our ancestors, is we start becoming intentional, and we start becoming open, and then we start becoming aware of what these energies are. One, to bring in the blessings and to receive the good stuff, right? And then to block and to receive protection from that what doesn't serve us. So let me go ahead and read the comments here. So Janet says, it's all energy swirling and transforming. We are leaky buckets, receiving and sending. Yes, and so now we don't have to be leaky buckets. There are practices that we can that we can use and to build up our boundaries. So we are leaky buckets because we don't have those practices, because we don't have those skills. If we learn those practices and we develop those skills, then we don't have to be leaky buckets. Now with, and that's one of the skills, is learning to work with your ancestors to help you with your boundaries, right? And so that's what's so important. And and sometimes, yes, sometimes their influence is not benevolent, which is why we want to ask for that protection from the well ancestors and to build our boundaries. So that's so important. Now, let me look at my notes and make sure. Um, and another thing that the ancestors can do is if you are wanting to achieve something and then you're having these difficulties, they can also energetically help to clear blocks. So that's something that you can also ask for. And then, of course, as you build a relationship with them, then you will become more and more comfortable about asking, what can I ask, what can they do, and depending on what blessings each individual ancestor is bringing, then that can provide you more information about how particularly that one ancestor can assist you. Now, one of the practices that I do with clients is I help them to connect with very specific ancestors. So we go and look for ancestors of particular lines, and then bring them forward, and then connect specifically, understanding who they are, and then what particular energies they're bringing in. But of course, to get started, you don't necessarily need to know all the details. But if you do want to know all the details, that's certainly work that we can do. So, again, very important to get into the practice of calling in the well ancestors, right? So, anytime that we are calling those energies in, being very intentional that we want to connect, and we are asking for the assistance of the well ancestors. So that's something we want to make sure that we don't forget. Now, what does it mean that they are well ancestors? It means that they passed on and they reconciled. Now, that does not necessarily mean that they didn't have difficulties in their lifetime. So they could have had difficulties in their lifetime. However, when they transitioned, they were able to reconcile that through work, through their own work, to when they passed on. And so, of course, that happens, and there's a lot of learning that you can do about what happens when you transition over. But the reason why some don't reconcile, don't fully transition and reconcile, is because something is keeping them stuck here, right? So something, a regret, a choice. And usually, in my experience in working with clients and working with my own ancestors, it's been that there's something that they wanted to achieve that doesn't get achieved during the lifetime. Like there was something that, there was some purpose that they wanted, and there's deep regret at not having achieved it. And so that regret holds them here. And so sometimes they do need assistance to be able to fully transition so that then they can go reconcile in the spiritual realm, and not have those negative energies affecting us. So that's important to know about the ancestor, the not well ancestors, is that they're not necessarily wanting to stay here. Some of them are stuck, right? They can't move on because they have this energy that's keeping them here. And so then they need assistance to transition so that then they can go reconcile. And of course, once they've reconciled, then they can come back as well ancestors, and then they come back and they can assist us. And so that's something that we want to make sure that we do with our relatives that pass on, is we can also do that particular service for them, is to make sure that they have fully transitioned and that moving on so that they can reconcile. And so it's important to know that we have, as the living, as their descendants, we have that ability to help them to become well ancestors so that then they can come back and assist us. So that's really important. And of course, there are other types of ancestors that I'm not necessarily going to get into, but just know that there are ancestors, for example, they're teachers, people who helped you and you build relationships in this particular lifetime. There could be teachers who created a line of learning that you're benefiting from, and then you can connect with that particular teacher. So sometimes the ancestors don't necessarily need to be blood connected through blood lineage. They can be connected through maybe an intellectual lineage or some other type of community lineage that we establish. So that's also possible to do, is to make those connections. But a lot of us, we're going to benefit the most by making these connections with our direct lineage ancestors. So whether they're from recent generations or from more, or if we have to reach back into several generations ago to connect with well ancestors. And now a lot of the reasons why we don't, certain like recent generations, why ancestors don't become well ancestors is because we don't have these practices. We've lost these practices in our culture to make sure that people can fully transition, right? And a lot of times that those practices really start before death to make sure that there's not anything that has been like things that in a relationship that need to be said that don't aren't left unsaid, connections that need to be acknowledged. So things like that we don't do. We a lot of times we wait until after the person has passed to try and do that, and a lot of times it's better if the person is able to do that before they pass on, because then their transition will be so much easier. Because of course, once we die and we don't have the body, then we also lose our sense of free will, and we're more so the dead tend to be tied more to those energetic signatures that stay during that transition process, that are still lingering, and then they don't have enough power to release themselves from those loops, from being connected to those energetic signatures. So, okay, so let's get to what do we do? So how can we connect with the ancestors? And it's to start, I would suggest that you start with a very simple practice. So you can just lay out a very it doesn't have to be a very big space. It can be a very small space. So you can see back here, like a shelf, a bookshelf, or a little corner of a table, of a dresser, maybe. So just a space that's dedicated to the ancestors. And then you can start by offering them water, and you can light a candle. And that would be the simplest thing. And if saying, well, the candle, if you're worried about a candle and fire, you can start just with water. And so it doesn't have to be a lot of water. So I'm going to give you an example here. I have these votives. So in different places in my house, I have different altars. And so the altar to my ancestor, when I started with just like a little votive. So it doesn't need to be a glass of water. Now it can be, right? It doesn't need to be anything special. So you can just have a glass and then fill it with water, and then try and do that as often as you can. So daily, if you can. If you can't remember daily, then as often as you remember. The more you try to establish a daily practice, then the faster your connection and your relationship with them builds, right? It's the same thing as if you build a relationship with someone new. If you met a friend, right? If you saw them every day, your friendship would grow a lot stronger and faster than if you only saw them once a month. So, so I encourage you. Now, you don't have to feel guilty if you forget one day, or you're really busy and you forget. That's fine. Just come back to it the next time, right? So what you do is just in whatever vessel you're going to have the water, you just fill it with water. So I'm just going to do this here, and then you offer it and then you can either offer it out loud. So this water is for my well ancestors, or you can. It's better if you can say it out loud, but you don't have to. You can just say it in your mind, or you can whisper it. You can get nice little kind of decorative glass that's specifically for this particular practice, where all you do is, again, you fill it with water, or you put as much water. You don't necessarily have to fill it, but you put water, and then you offer it to your ancestors. And so if you have the glass like this, then you just put it in the space where that's going to be dedicated for the ancestors, so that you know that this water is for them. And so then you put it there. So then that becomes part of your connection, is you offering this water to the ancestors. Now, so if you think of being a good guest, right? So whenever you're invited to a party, you bring something with you to offer to the host. And so part of what we're doing here is we're asking to start building a relationship with them, right? So in a sense, this desire to build a relationship with them is a request. So we're inviting them in, and we're giving this offering as this sign of inviting them forward. And then, of course, water represents life, right? Water represents flow. Water is this connection. And so you can think of, well, why water? Well, we need water to survive, right? And so the water is this sign of life, right? And so the sign of nourishment, and that we are giving to start building this relationship with them. So that's one thing that you can do, is just offering them water. And I would suggest, if you are, when I started, I had to put the ancestor space somewhere where I saw it every day. And so, and that was close to a water source, so that as soon as, oh, I need to put water for the ancestors, I would go and fill it up. Then also I got into the practice of having like a little water container, like a water jug, near my altar. And so then I would then fill it up from the water jug. So I would do anything that would make it easier for me, so that I didn't have to like go down the hall to go get the water and to remember. And so I made it as easy as possible. Another thing that I did was, because I was like, oh, what do I do with the water? Like, I have to, because if you have this water like this, well, then what do you do with it the next day, right? You have to dump it out so that you can put the new water in. And so then I also got a plant. So I got a little plant, and I put it as part of the ancestor altar, so that then I could pour the water into the plant, and then pour the new one. And so in a sense, so the plant also became an offering. And so what I was doing, one is I was making it as easy as possible for me to be able to do this practice, so that I didn't put any roadblocks, okay, because I knew, okay, I have to throw out the water. I have to remember to do that. I have to remember to go get the water. And so I did whatever was possible. For some of you, it may be easier. For me, it's I have to build all these things if I want to develop a practice, so that it's easier and I actually develop it. So if you want to have a candle, you can do like a votive candle. And so I'm going to light a candle for the ancestors. So that's another thing that you can do, is you can just have maybe like a tea light, and then turn on the tea light. And of course, you be careful with fire if you do, or have it in a place where you're not going to, there's not going to be anything that's flammable close by. So there's the fire. And so then that can become part of the altar. And notice that it doesn't have to take up a lot of space. Now, as you develop your practice, then it may take up more space. So you may want to maybe have the full shelf for them, or then you develop where you have just a whole altar just set up for the ancestors. Um, so that is just a simple practice. Another thing that people love to do is to burn incense. So that's another thing that you can do. Now, one of the things that, and so fire, why would we burn fire? Well, of course, fire is about protection. Is you know, it represents illumination. It was people came around the fire, you know, in communities, and so again, when we are you can think of the flame as lighting the way for the ancestors to come and connect. So, so fire is also a good one. So notice that each, whatever it is that you offer, has its own energy of what you're offering. So water is flow, is life, versus fire is like protection, illumination. So, so I have these incense that I bought on Etsy. So somebody who handmades these, and they're very fragrant. So this is stick incense, so you can do that. Of course, there's other types of incense that you can buy. So there's this frankincense and myrrh tend to be my favorite. So that's what I order. So you can have this, and then you can burn a stick of incense, and then just let it. You don't have to worry too much about the flame, right? Because you turn on the incense. Now, some people can't burn incense inside their home, or you can also start it inside and then put it out on, if you have a balcony, if you have a porch or a patio, and then let it burn or finish burning outside. So that's something that you can do. And of course, you don't have to burn the entire thing. You can just light it, burn a little bit, and give some of the smoke as an offering, and then just extinguish it, and then use it the next time. And so the time that you spend with the ancestors doesn't need to be very long. It has to be, it doesn't have to take 30 minutes. It doesn't even have to take 10 minutes. But of course, just like a relationship, the more time you spend with them, then the more you feel the connection with your ancestors. And then of course, when you do this is when you are going to ask for their blessing. You're going to ask for their protection. So one of the very first you can say prayers or statements that I learned when I started to make offerings to the ancestors, and especially because I didn't know who specifically they were. I just would say, as I was placing the water, or as I was placing the fire, so I would say, I bless and thank the spirits and powers, known and unknown, seen and unseen, who love, protect, and assist me. And so that was the intention that I set of connecting with these spirits. And so because, and again, known and unknown, because I may have known some of them, and there's others that I may not know. And of course, I'm asking particularly for blessings and protection from them. And so the ancestor practice doesn't need to be very complex. It doesn't need to be complicated. And again, the more you do it, you can acknowledge them as you. So if you have this little corner in a space where you traffic during the day, so you go back and forth, you can acknowledge them. And again, the more that you're able to spend time with them, then and treat them, they were people, right? There are individuals. So treat them like you would treat a new friend, wanting to get to know them, sharing about yourself, and then being open to messages from them, being open to feeling that connection. And so depending on what your own communication gifts are, whether you may start to see messages, or you may start to get awarenesses of things. You may start to feel different. And so it all just depends on what your own particular skills are. And if you're like, well, I don't know what my skills are, well, just be open to see what you notice, and how things start to develop for you. And so keep in mind that one of the things that I'm doing here is I'm sharing with you ways that you can connect with your ancestors, and because that is a legacy that they left for you, right? So they are their or you are the answer to their prayers. And so just like you connect with them and develop this practice, then you hope in the future that you can become a well ancestor to help your descendants, and to where they can call on you and your gifts and your what you learned, the lessons that you learned in this lifetime, to help them to be better humans, when whatever generation they are, whether they are grandchildren, or down the line, depending on people who connect. And so if we develop this practice ourselves, then we can also leave this practice to our descendants to continue on. And so we want to leave a legacy in we're working on the legacy that we want to leave in this particular lifetime, but the legacy continues even beyond. And so developing that relationship with the ancestors really makes you aware of how much power we have, and how much we can help those that are coming later. But of course, we need to make sure that we are well, and that we are able to reconcile, or at least get the assistance to reconcile, and really, when at the time of our death, that we fully transition, so that then we can reconcile, so that we can be well ancestors, because we don't want to be the unwell ancestors who don't benefit our own descendants. So that is part of my teaching today. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you share maybe your little altar practice, or your little altar space that you set up. You can share a picture of that in the comments. I would love to see what you have done, whether it's really simple like this, or whether you make it more decorative, or add other elements to it. Just do what you feel called to do. So I would love to see pictures of those if you're willing to share. So thank you so much for joining me. And if you have any questions, make sure to post them in the comments. I'll be coming back and keeping track of questions, and then responding to them. Or maybe that'll give me ideas of other things that I can talk about in future videos. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I hope to connect with you soon.